C-5, Super Galaxy, the untold story of the world's largest military aircraft. Imagine standing on a runway. The ground is trembling, the air feels heavy, and on the horizon, a giant emerges. Not a passenger jet, not even a regular military transport, but a machine so massive it looks like it shouldn't even leave the Earth. This is the Lockheed C-5 Super Galaxy. It's not just an airplane, it's a flying warehouse. A machine so enormous it can swallow tanks, helicopters, even other aircraft inside its cavernous belly. To give you an idea, it can carry over 135 tons of cargo. That's more than the weight of an entire blue whale inside a plane. But here's the part most people don't know. This giant wasn't born out of confidence. It wasn't created because America wanted to show off. It was born out of fear. Fear of the Cold War. Fear of being outpaced by the Soviet Union. Fear that America's power might not reach the battlefield fast enough if the world went hot. And what started as a desperate gamble turned into one of the most controversial, most expensive, and eventually most indispensable aircraft in U.S. history. Today, we're going to dive into the untold story of the C-5 Super Galaxy. The highs, the lows, the failures, and the redemption of the world's largest military aircraft. Cold War pressure. The 1960s. The Cold War isn't just about nuclear missiles. It's about speed, about reach, about who can get there first. The U.S. Air Force looked at its fleet. The trusty C-130 Hercules, reliable but too small. The C-141 Starlifter, sleek but limited. Great planes couldn't carry heavy armor across oceans in a single leap. America needed something bigger, much bigger. Not just a transport, a global airlift weapon. The Pentagon laid down the challenge. Build a plane that can carry anything. Tanks, missiles, entire field hospitals. A plane that can fly halfway around the world, land on a rough strip of dirt, unload, and change the outcome of a war. Lockheed raised its hand, and what they promised seemed impossible. They envisioned a jet with a nose swinging open like a giant jaw, a tail with a ramp that could drop down for loading, and inside, a cavern so massive it could fit entire battlefields of equipment. They called it the C-5 Galaxy. But this wasn't just about bragging rights. This was survival. If the US could move troops and armor anywhere faster than the Soviets, it meant a decisive advantage. And so the race began, the giant's growing pains. But ambition has a cost. And the C-5, its cost nearly buried it. The first challenge was engineering. The plane was so big, no one had built landing gear like it before. The solution? 28 wheels. Enough to spread its massive weight, but complex enough to give mechanics nightmares. The wings? Stretched wide enough to lift a skyscraper. The fuel tanks? So huge that they could carry 50,000 gallons of jet fuel. But weight became the enemy. Lockheed promised a lighter plane, but the prototypes came in over 30 tons heavier than expected, and the price tag exploded. What began as a manageable contract turned into billions of dollars in overruns. By the early 1970s, critics were circling. Politicians called it a boondoggle. The press branded it a disaster. Even some inside the Air Force began to doubt. And the worst part? Cracks, literally. Early C-5s suffered from structural cracks in critical areas. The joke started spreading. The C didn't stand for cargo, it stood for can't fly. But here's the twist. Even with the problems when the C-5 flew, it proved extraordinary. It could move cargo no one had ever dreamed of lifting into the air. For the first time in history, a single aircraft could deliver an entire armored battalion's worth of gear across the globe. And that meant one thing. The C-5 might be expensive, it might be flawed, but it was changing the rules of the game. A love-hate relationship. Then came the wars. Vietnam, the Middle East. Later, Desert Storm, and humanitarian missions across the globe. The C-5 started showing up everywhere. Sure, it broke down often. Mechanics cursed its complexity. Crews joked that flying a C-5 meant bringing a toolbox the size of a pickup truck. But when it worked, it was unstoppable. Picture this. Instead of waiting weeks for tanks and helicopters to arrive by ship, an entire armored division could land in another hemisphere within 24 hours. And it wasn't just about war. The C-5 delivered food after famines, medical aid after earthquakes, and even space hardware for NASA missions. It became more than a machine. For the men and women who worked on it, it became a lifeline, a tool that could turn disaster into hope, chaos into order. The C-5 was never perfect, but it was irreplaceable, the giant that refused to retire. By the 2000s, the Air Force faced a decision: retire the old beasts or give them new life. The answer? Upgrade. The C-5M Super Galaxy was born. New engines, new avionics, stronger wings. Suddenly, this Cold War relic could fly higher, faster, and further than ever. The plane, once mocked as a failure, became one of the most powerful symbols of U.S. global reach. Today, the C-5 still flies, a silent giant, moving the chess pieces of global power without headlines. And here's the real twist. What began as a Cold War gamble, criticized as wasteful and broken, became the backbone of America's global mobility. The C-5 didn't just survive its flaws, it transcended them. Because sometimes history isn't made by perfect machines, it's made by the bold ones, the risky ones, the giants that force the world to adapt. And the C-5 Super Galaxy? It's still out there, still flying, still proving that sometimes the impossible does take off.